GE called it a revolution. What it really sparked was the company's downfall. After Alco's downfall, GE was desperate for redemption. It was the machine that could silence critics, crush EMD's dominance, and win back the railroad's trust. It hauled mile-long freight trains across America, pulling the nation's economy on its iron shoulders. From the U-25B to the Dash 9, it became the heartbeat of GE's locomotive empire. But behind the marketing hype and horsepower claims, there was something GE did not want anyone to know. The 7FDL16 had a fatal flaw, one buried under decades of press releases and performance charts. It ran hot, too hot. Engines failed, railroads complained, and engineers whispered what GE's executives refused to admit, that the powerhouse driving their success might also be the thing slowly tearing it down. Back then, GE was not the industry titan it's remembered as today. It was the quiet partner in someone else's success, playing second fiddle to powerhouses like Alco and EMD. They built the electrical systems, traction motors, and generators, but never got the glory. GE had the technology, the talent, and the hunger, but what it did not have was an identity. That started to change with a bold and ultimately disastrous gamble, the Alco-GE alliance. On paper, it looked unstoppable. Alco brought decades of locomotive experience. GE brought cutting-edge electrical innovation. Together, they set their sights on dethroning EMD, whose legendary 567 engine had already become the industry's untouchable standard. For a moment, it looked like the underdogs might actually pull it off. But then came Alco's 244 diesel, an engine so rushed, so unreliable, it practically self-destructed. Locomotives broke down, railroads lost patience, and as Alco's reputation went up in smoke, GE quietly took notes. Behind closed doors, GE's engineers were already planning their escape and their revenge. They began secretly developing a new prime mover, one that could erase Alco's mistakes and rewrite GE's future. That secret project became the FDL series, short for four-stroke diesel locomotive, though there was nothing simple about it. The early prototypes of the mid-1950s were tough, turbocharged, and built to endure. GE was out to bury them. And by 1959, GE finally did what no one thought possible. They stepped out of Alco's shadow and into the spotlight. Then came the moment that changed GE's destiny forever. In 1959, the company unveiled its first fully independent locomotive, the U-25B, powered by the now legendary 7FDL16 engine. It was a shock to every company that ever underestimated GE. The U stood for Universal, and GE meant it. This locomotive could run anywhere, pull anything, and survive almost any condition America's railroads could throw at it. With 2,500 horsepower under the hood, the U-25B was a powerhouse. Crews loved how it handled, maintenance teams praised how simple it was to service, and most importantly, it worked day after day, mile after mile, something Alco's 244s never could. Even some of EMD's once dominant 567 engines started looking outdated next to GE's new beast, but the real magic was in its heart, the 7FDL16. Railroads could not get enough of it. It was durable, relentless, and nearly indestructible, the kind of engine that could take the abuse, the heat, and the pressure without cracking. To the outside world, it looked like GE had finally created perfection. But deep inside that iron giant, something was already starting to burn. Over time, GE perfected the illusion of invincibility. They reworked the cooling systems, boosted turbocharging efficiency, and reinforced internal components until the engine seemed bulletproof. By the late 1960s and well into the 1970s, the FDL series had evolved into a dynasty. Each new generation, the U30C, the U36C, and eventually the Dash 7 series, pushed power and performance higher than ever, all while keeping the same basic core, the 7FDL16. That was the genius and the trap of GE's design. They reinvent the wheel every few years. They keep upgrading the same heart, making it stronger, faster, more efficient, but also more fragile in ways no one talked about. The 7FDL16 was a shapeshifter, molded to fit whatever GE needed it to be, but that kind of longevity comes at a cost. exhaust, and before long, the cracks beneath its legendary reputation started to show. It was the engine that never stopped evolving. The 7FDL16 could be upgraded, re-rated, and fine-tuned endlessly without ever scrapping the foundation that made it a success. GE had built a platform, one they could tweak and rebrand for decades. By the time the Dash 8s and Dash 9s hit the rails in the 1980s and 1990s, it powered thousands of locomotives across North America, hauling coal from Wyoming's Powder River Basin, dragging mile-long intermodal trains across the plains, and muscling heavy freight over the Appalachians. That deep, thunderous exhaust note became a national soundtrack, echoing through rail yards of BNSF, CSX, and Norfolk Southern. Every generation of FDL represented another step in GE's climb to the top. The Dash 7s brought smarter traction control and advanced electronics. The Dash 8s refined it. The Dash 9s pushed it to its limit. But here's the twist. That same engine core was never replaced. Even as GE celebrated its modernization, the truth was, the heart of every so-called new locomotive was still the same decades-old design, the 7FDL16. And eventually, that decision to keep pushing an aging giant would come back to haunt them. The Dash 8s perfected fuel efficiency and reliability. The Dash 9s, powered by a more refined version of that same 7FDL16, became a legend, one of the most successful freight locomotives ever built. By the 1990s, the tables had turned. The once invincible EMD was suddenly the one scrambling to keep up. GE's obsession with data, diagnostics, and incremental perfection had paid off big time. What started as a risky experiment had become the backbone of a global locomotive empire. The 7FDL16 was now everywhere, crossing deserts, climbing mountains, and thundering through cities. It was the muscle behind America's industrial pulse. But behind closed doors, there was always a quiet truth, one that GE never bragged about. Ask any mechanic or engineer who worked with it, and they'd tell you the same thing. The FDL was a beast, but a moody one. It was powerful, but it had a temper. Push it too hard, run it too long, and it would remind you who was really in control. And that temper? It would soon become GE's biggest problem. Still, those challenges did not stop GE from dominating the rails. The 7FDL16 gave the company what it had been chasing for decades: credibility. It transformed GE from a parts supplier into a full-blown locomotive powerhouse, and it carried that empire for nearly 5 decades. But, for all its glory, there was one flaw everyone in the industry whispered about. One GE quietly hoped people would not notice. The 7FDL16 ran hot. Not a little warm, not within limits. Hot. It earned a reputation for pushing temperatures other engines would not dare touch. And when you are hauling thousands of tons of freight through scorching deserts, freezing mountain passes, and endless plains, that kind of heat is a time bomb. The problem went all the way back to its design. The 7FDL was a turbocharged 4-stroke, 16-cylinder diesel that crammed massive power into a relatively compact frame. Each cylinder was working overtime, generating the kind of internal temperatures that made even seasoned engineers sweat. That meant extreme combustion heat, blistering exhaust temperatures, and a constant, delicate balancing act just to keep it running. In cooler regions like the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest, it was manageable with constant maintenance and a bit of luck. But in hotter regions like the American Southwest, Australia, and South America, the FDL's fiery personality turned from quirk to chronic problem. What was a manageable inconvenience up north became a daily nightmare under the sun. Engineers began noticing the same warning signs again and again: cooling fans struggling to keep up, radiators running at their limits for hours, and cylinder heads practically baking under relentless heat. And when temperatures climbed too high, the results were predictable and expensive. Power derating, efficiency drops, and in the worst cases, catastrophic engine failures that took locomotives out of service for days, sometimes weeks. Railroads learned to live with it because they had no choice. Maintenance crews got creative, building entire routines around the FDL's heat issues, cleaning radiators obsessively, testing coolant like their jobs depended on it, and clearing every speck of dust or debris that could choke airflow. Some operators even went as far as derating their locomotives during summer, cutting horsepower just to keep them alive through brutal heat waves. The 7FDL16 could pull the world's freight, but in the wrong climate, it was like a racehorse running with a fever. And GE, they knew it. They just never talked about it. And yet, the FDL never stopped running hot. It was part of its personality, a fiery, relentless heartbeat that crews learned to live with. For some, it even became a badge of honor. But not everyone shared that sense of humor. Mechanics grumbled about the tight engine compartments, the cooked components, and the constant battle just to keep the beast operational. Some half-jokingly called it a furnace with pistons, half in admiration, half in exasperation. Over the years, they rolled out every cooling upgrade imaginable: larger radiators, stronger fans, better water pumps, redesigned cylinder heads, enhanced oil cooling systems. Each tweak helped, but none could truly tame the FDL. Its high output nature meant heat was baked into its DNA. What made it even more frustrating was the comparison. Every time railroads looked at rival engines, especially EMD's seemingly cool-running 567s, the FDL's temperamental warmth stood out. It was a silent reminder. GE had built a powerhouse, but one that came with a built-in warning label. By contrast, EMD's 645 and later 710 series engines, with their two-stroke design, ran noticeably cooler under the same brutal conditions. The FDL's heat was an operational problem. On steep grades or endless desert runs, dispatchers had to plan around it. You could not just hammer a string of FDL-powered units at full throttle for hours without courting thermal disaster. Crews developed almost instinctual strategies: when to ease off, when to let the engine breathe, and when to coast to save heat. Handling the FDL was part science, part art, and all experience. Yet, railroads tolerated its fiery personality for one simple reason: power and reliability. Sure, it ran hot, sometimes painfully so, but it delivered brute force performance that few competitors could touch. Properly maintained, an FDL could outpull almost anything EMD built at the time. By the 1980s, GE had largely accepted the heat as the price of performance. Their focus shifted to preventing it from causing catastrophic failures. They upgraded metallurgy, improved oil circulation, and rolled out advanced monitoring systems. Some later models even had automatic temperature-based derating, throttling power to protect the engine from its own heat. Still, in extreme climates, the FDL's temper remained legendary. Shop crews swapped stories of locomotives in the Australian outback running only at night to avoid thermal overload. In the American desert, maintenance teams blasted radiators with high-pressure air every few days, just to keep airflow efficient. The 7FDL16 became known for its resilience and its temper. Like a world-class athlete with a short fuse, it could move mountains when respected, but push it too hard, and it would remind you exactly how hot it liked to run. And despite its quirks, despite the heat, the FDL cemented itself as a fixture across North America and eventually the world. But depending on who you asked, the 7FDL16 was either a masterpiece of diesel engineering or a necessary evil. Railroads had opinions and none were subtle. To some, it was GE's finest creation, a relentless hauler that could drag tonnage through anything short of a brick wall. To others, it was temperamental, demanding, and a little too moody for its own good. The truth? Somewhere in between. For giants like Burlington Northern, Norfolk Southern, CSX, and Conrail, FDL-powered fleets became the backbone of heavy freight operations. These railroads quickly discovered that the engine rewarded discipline. Follow the maintenance schedules, keep cooling systems spotless, and treat it with care, and the FDL would deliver remarkable consistency. When it worked, it really worked. Its power curve was smooth and steady, giving GE locomotives a distinct edge in high adhesion pulling. In the mountains or on the heavy main lines, the FDL was a force to be reckoned with. But here's the flip side. The very qualities that made it powerful also made it demanding. Neglect it for even a short stretch, and the FDL could flip from flawless to fussy in a heartbeat. It was a beast that demanded respect and punished carelessness. In the cab, crews loved the raw muscle, but they could feel the heat, quite literally. mechanics developed a love-hate relationship with the FDL. They admired its durability, but dreaded the repairs. Railroads that invested time in understanding the FDL learned to work with it, not against it. They discovered the right coolant additives, the ideal radiator cleaning schedules, and how to balance loading cycles to keep temperatures manageable. Over time, the difference between railroads became clear. Union Pacific and BNSF developed deep familiarity and integrated FDL units into their fleets with remarkable success. Others, especially in hotter regions or with less maintenance infrastructure, struggled. The divide was the discipline applied to it. The FDL's reputation for being temperamental came from its complexity and high performance ceiling. Unlike EMD's famously forgiving 645 or 710 engines, which could survive deferred maintenance and rough conditions, the FDL demanded respect. Discipline rewarded you with decades of reliable service. Neglect invited trouble. Ask a veteran engineer or shop foreman, and they describe it as a great engine that likes to run hot. It had character, delivering service across the harshest environments imaginable. Even EMD loyalists had to admit the FDL was fussy, yes, but fierce. By the 1990s, most railroads had accepted the FDL for what it was, a machine demanding attention, but rewarding it with sheer pulling power and longevity. The trade-off was simple. Care for it, it delivers. Ignore it, it bites back. In 2005, GE finally turned the page with the GE VO12, part of the Evolution series. The GE VO was everything the FDL lacked. Cooler, cleaner, more efficient, smoother running, and able to handle modern regulatory and operational demands that would have cooked the old FDL alive. Yet, the FDL did not fade quietly. Many railroads ran their fleets for years afterward, swearing by its pulling strength and battle-tested durability. Even with its heat quirks, it had proven it could take a beating and keep going, earning respect long after retirement. So, was the GE 7FDL16 a revolutionary success, or a problem that refused to die? Maybe it was both.